Hello, I'm Mary O'Malley, and I want to have a few words with you about the Shark Nursery. This is my 10th collection, and it's with Carcanet. I live just outside Galway, but and this is relevant to the book, I was raised on the coast about 50 miles away from here in a place known generally as Connemara. We knew the area I grew up in as Erismore. And I came from a fishing family. My father has fished first in traditional boats and then in curraghs, kind of thing you read about and sing. And then later on in a more modern boat. And I was lucky because I was allowed to go out in the boat with him from when I was tiny sometimes. And I loved it. And it was also very important to me. I never felt that women didn't have the right to do things, I think, as a result of that. I never felt particularly wrongly in some cases that there were things forbidden me because I was a woman. And several of the animals and sea creatures in this book really go back. They're both mythical and practical, actual, and many of them, I was surrounded by horses, for example. I was surrounded by horses growing up by the ponies. And I was surrounded by, there were dolphins in the bay. There were basking sharks, which come into the book in the bay. Just that whole environment stayed with me, and the creatures I became used to then, as much as I did people, really, in many ways. And often, I think, saved my bacon, really. Certainly during lockdown. I was amazed at how many of those came and sort of spoke to me or let me speak through them. This book has, I think, even more creatures than are usual in my books, although there are usually quite a few. Now, they're not always creatures they're creatures from life, but they're always also creatures from mythology and the annals, the old Irish annals in Irish, which were a very, very strong part of my life, my world, really, and have always been. But I'm going to start with a lockdown poem, and it's called A Morning Swim, because I used to live for the moment we'd be allowed to swim and go into the pool early in the morning. You'd have to book when we were allowed. On a Wednesday, I drive past the docks, past the skimpy tent of a homeless woman, a giant wind turbine on its side like Ozymandias, part of some army ready to annex the coast. The twisted scrap piled high shines. The sea is calm after yesterday's storm. Its flat grey skin sinks and rises, breathing deep. Light flashes from the metal like knives. It is 5 to 7. This is how the town would look if Moses' women sailed in from Ararat on their ark. At the pool, I dive in, swim length after length, and at the count of 30, turn and float and dive again before climbing out of time, liquid as a swallow into gravity's haul and drag. During lockdown, I was desperate to escape, and I used to fantasize about perhaps finding someone to allow me on a boat to go to France, because that was the closest place you could hope to get to. And it was a fantasy. Even I knew at the worst parts of lockdown that it was a fantasy, but what harm? There were two wonderful sites. One was the shipping site, which gives you anywhere in the world, you just zone in and find every registered craft that's leaving or arriving along the coast. And I would follow the sea roads to America, to Valparaiso, to wherever I fancied, and see what boats were arriving there, and which ones from Galway were due where. And something about that, it was wonderful, because when all the planes were downed pretty much, and there were no traffic sounds, the sea was absolutely full of movement in ships above it and below it. And that sort of notion of that double life pervades the book, I think, really, to a great extent. Here again, into that sort of strangely stilled life, frozen life in some ways, contemplative for some. I would wait and wait and wait for something that would promise a future. And this was what promised the future for me, late swallow. Up from under and past the window, your loops and dives leave ripples in the air, the winged Matisse painting with scissors. You have stretched summer almost to my birthday. Go, I need you safely in the square in Alcalá. This awful year, I can't follow. And I read the last poem from this section, which is one of my favorite poems in the book, probably because a lot of my worlds come together in it, but really because it was a miraculous moment. It was the moment that the traditional boats, which are in this little area of Galway called the Claddagh, they're in the Claddagh Basin. I saw the sails rise for the first time in over a year, I think, or certainly in a very long time. They're now used as training ships for kids, which is wonderful. Young people. And they were the traditional boats that, say, my father had, and were sailed along the Connemara coast, bringing turf to the various places and to the islands. And when I was a small child, I was let out in one of those. And this is called, this is now on a stone in the Claddagh, just beside the Claddagh Basin. So it's a sonnet. In the middle of the long walk, I stopped on the bridge. A sail was hoisted in the sun, then another. The criss-crossed slowly, monarchs dancing. I walked on, lifted out of grief. The busker in Shop Street sang for a blind boy, and the bright levitating girl danced the passing crowds into Blake's old-style joy. All silenced, all empty. Now, between the heavy curves of the hooker, a ghost slips out of the basin, my father's glow jug, with my 7-year-old hand on the tiller, eyes ahead, steady on the mark. The keel slides down a trough, up and over in an arc clean as a knife blade. Time bucks in the stirrups, a line of poems on the boat in the boat's wake. I watched them disappear and walked back over the bridge, past the black half-dressed beauties shifting in their stalls. The glow jug is one of the smaller and more joyous, I think, of those big traditional boats. The other, I mentioned creatures, and obviously the book takes its name, The Shark Nursery, from a headline that was in the local paper. And there's a place near Galway in Ornmore called the Marine Library, and I have a couple of poems from there. I was fascinated by the Marine Institute, and I've had a lot to do with Marine Institutes over the years, because for maybe 25 years I was involved loosely in a team dealing with the environmental protection of the oceans, a loose team of artists, musicians, and scientists. And obviously I had one book that was specifically arose from a cruise I made on our marine research ship. I wasn't so lucky this time, but this is the title poem of the book, if you like. It's called The Shark Nursery, and it's in honor of, it's in honor of a little fish that I never knew was part of the shark family, but which was absolutely reviled and just thrown back into the sea when they were caught. And I only discovered from this newspaper article that they were technically a member of the shark family. I am dogfish. When I hatch, I threaten nobody. We gather in nesting places in rock and coral. I am harmless, thrown back by trawlermen. Nobody eats me. Today, we're in the news. Scientists have observed a rare shark nursery off the west coast. Now we have status. I'm a shark suddenly, and my young safe in their mermaids' purses are treasure in a coral room. I am a black-mouthed cat shark now, shown some respect. That's nice. But inside, I'm still a dogfish, reviled. Poor little dogfish. Sometime during those years that I was writing this book, yet another war started. And this is, I just quote a line of Spencer, who would know all about it. At the beginning, days there is hideous chaos in the world. And I think these are, to some extent, days of hideous chaos. The iron wolf is, this is a folk tale. The iron wolf is lonely. His brothers are dead. And though they fought, he misses them. Some say he killed them, but we miss what we destroy. Now he is howling in his lair, trying to devour his God. When he succeeds, he'll have no one. He will call to his God when the world rots in his metal teeth. He would cry for the time when a star spoke from the mouth of a cave. The other thing that I found interesting during this, and after that period, was a sense of erasure. I think this notion of the binary, I knew something was happening, but I wasn't perhaps consciously trying to figure out what. And it was only when it was over that I realized, oh, the world's moved on a hinge. And the sort of communication that we were used to, face-to-face, three-dimensional, debate, as opposed to tiny little tweets, took against the poor old tweets during lockdown, was actually, things had moved. And we were now really in binary land, and there was a screen between us and communication. And there were wonderful benefits to this, but there were a lot of losses, like every major change, a lot of loss. And perhaps I'll find Google Town, which is about that. I used to look out the window and see almost nobody. And everybody seemed to be Zooming all the time. And we had a very strange, for me, initially, phenomenon in Ireland, which was Zoom funerals. So funerals are important social occasions here. And it was very, very odd. I'll just pause a moment while I find this. The Ballad of Google Town. I'll read the whole thing, but it can be The Ballad of Google Town. The cars are in the drive and the bees are in the hive. There are no birds in the sky in Google Town. There's no God up there on high, but the cash machines don't dry. There are hearts and flowers to buy in Google Town. Google Town. There are 2 cars in the drive and there's 1 man left alive. He's not prepared to shrive in Google Town. There's fracking on the hill and the camera roams at will. It's all orderly and still in Google Town. Cars are in the drive and the bees are in the hive. They say the kids are safe inside in Google Town, where they shop on Amazon buying handbags by the ton, or the latest shoes or guns in Google Town. Google Town. The man is dancing out of tune, shouting, "I'm the promised one," beating on a drunken drum in Google Town. He's following his own sweet light. Now he's burning fast and bright. He won't last another night in Google Town. But then it moves and you move out of it, and there's this magnificent kind of whoosh of delight. And I think it was in that sense, I wrote a poem called Heligoland about those crucial weeks when on the island of Helgoland, but I call it Heligoland, like wasn't it Joyce said, Heligoland with its one tree. And the area I grew up in probably has a few more than one tree, but it hasn't got many because it's fairly windswept. So I thought I felt a certain kinship. And this is a poem about the sort of miracle that happens when you discover a law that you hadn't previously known about. I've always thought physicists were the most interesting people because so many of their theories sound completely bonkers, like poetry does, or like miracles. Heligoland. Take God drawing life in faint outline, just blocking it in, all the time in the world. Out of the box of light, a single photon escapes, a tiny sun in a dark universe. It charges on like a bold child and spreads itself out. It whips along the curves and tongues of this new racetrack until it meets a rose and slows down, enchanted. Then the necessary angel shifts her gaze. Space curls around her like a mink wrap. A river of particles rushes towards her and moves on. They sparkle. Heisenberg slips past, headed for Heligoland. When he looks back, there's a red rose pinned to the angel's cloak. For weeks he can't sleep. He will spend his first days in the archipelago jotting it down, filling it in, riding the waves where they take him to the cloak, the electric river, the impossible rose. I hope you enjoy the book, and I'm certainly very grateful to the team, to the designer, and to the editors, Michael and John, and for their support and their continued support over the years. It's very important to me.